Hello everyone, so this time I would like to share a video on how to create belt with a buckle. I will make a few of these videos using different types of buckles just to show how this method applies in different situations. Also, I got a software that shows the shortcuts that I'm using, so when I press some buttons you will be able to see them here in the right corner. I heard that it's a bit difficult to follow the workflow if I'm using the shortcuts, and I know sometimes I don't really mention the functions that I'm using, so I can understand it could be a bit difficult, especially if you're like at the beginning of using CLO. So I hope this this little software helps you follow. But in case you can't understand what kind of function I'm using at some point, make sure to leave a comment. I will answer and let you know about the functions. Okay, so let's start. Here I have the default CLO avatar and I will create belt at waist level. I don't have the specific measurements in mind, so I will start with measuring the waist. The default CLO avatar already has set measurements put on the avatar, so it's very easy to measure them. You can just go select this edit measurement, or is it edit measure tool, and you can click on the measurement line and you will be able to see the measurement here. So I will create a rectangle and it will be a little bit bigger than the waist, so let's do 62 centimeter and it will be 5 centimeter height of the belt for now. Next I will place the belt on arrangement point on the back so that the front is sewn at the front of the avatar, and I will sew the front with segment sewing tool, and I simulate with spacebar. They should write spacebar on this one. Okay, anyway, so here is my belt, and now I will add the trim, the buckle. So for this I will use just the buckle from Close Connect library. So these items are free items, so you can use them as well, and they come in trim format, so you can add them to workspace as trim. And here is the buckle, and with this little tool I can attach the buckle to any point on a pattern, in this case on the belt. So it seems like the buckle is a bit small, so I want to resize it, and for that I can use this function here. So when you click on it, the gizmo will change to this type of gizmo, and then you can resize the buckle along these axes, or you can resize it proportionally by dragging on the gray box. So I want to resize it proportionally, something like this. And to go back to normal gizmo, just have to click again on this icon, and I also want to rotate it in this way. Okay, something like that. Now I need to resize the belt a little bit because it's too wide for this buckle, so for that I will use this linear measure tool for garment. This tool I really like because you can measure the distance between 2 points on a garment, and very often it's very useful for me. So let's see, maybe 36 millimeter can be the width of my belt. And now I will resize the belt. So how I usually like to resize pattern pieces, I like to do it symmetrically. So I usually double click in the middle, and you can see that all these points now are orange. So that means that whenever you will resize the pattern piece, it will do it symmetrically. So I want to resize the height. So as I drag, you can already see in the preview that it's resizing the pattern from both sides. And as I drag with the left click, I right click at the same time, and then I can get this little window here, and I can input the specific height that I want to achieve, so 36. And this looks pretty good, so I will keep it like that. And of course later on I can resize it if I want to. Another thing about resizing the trim, I know some time ago you could resize the trim also with specific values when you click on the trim and then the properties were shown here, but recently I think they updated it at some point, I don't know when, that all the trims now are under this tab, this trim tab, so you will see all the trims here, and then you have to select the trim on the list and then you will find and input specific values if you have any. Okay, so now I will create a pattern piece that will hold this trim, so it will be basically this rectangle like this, so I have to cut it off the belt. So for that I will create internal lines. So to determine where to put those internal lines, I will just zoom in, click in 3D on the pattern somewhere here, and by using the polygon tool I will draw internal line where this blue point was. So that blue point indicates where I clicked on the pattern in 3D. So the same on the other side. It doesn't have to be super precise, something like this is okay. And then I will select both lines and do cut and sew. And then I am moving the other side, so I want these two to be together and I want to eliminate the sewing here, so I will merge these two pattern pieces. And here you can do merging with the edit sewing tool. So when you select this tool and right click on a sewing line, you will find the merge option here, and then it merges the patterns like this. And now as I did cut, I think my trim is not attached to a pattern anymore, so I have to attach it again. And one point about attaching things, it really depends where you click on the trim. So if I click on this corner and I want to attach the trim to pattern, you can see that that's where the software will attach the trim. So it's important where exactly you click on the trim. So I recommend to click somewhere in the middle, like here. So that will just make the placement a little bit easier and more accurate, like this. Okay. Now I will move forward with making a loop for this part. First thing is to add some extra length to the pattern, which will create the loop. So first what I will do, I will offset as pattern outline, and here I just start with some value. It can be whichever value you think would work. So here I will add 15 extra millimeter, create internal line, and here you can use either extend or perpendicular. It basically gives the same result. Okay, and now I will fold it like this. And one thing you need to do at this point, you need to adjust the sewing a little bit. So as you can see now, the pattern piece that is carrying the trim is now attached to the outline here, but it should be attached to this line here. So I will just delete it and redo the sewing like this. Okay, and another thing, I need to create another internal line here where the loop will be stitched down. So I will offset as internal line 15 millimeter from the fold line, and I can stitch this down. Okay. And another thing I will do, I will add additional internal line, 5 millimeter inside from both sides, because usually I think when these loops are created in real belts, either they're stitched down to 2 stitches or a bar tack or something like that, so it also looks better if there are 2 lines creating the stitch like this. But I can already see that this loop will be too small, but we'll see that later on. Next thing, what I should do now is I need to reduce particle distance to 5 so that I can see already how it will look in the final result, as well as additional thickness collision I will put at 1, because if it's at 2.5 it tends to like freak out a little bit. One thing about the trim weight. So I usually don't use any weight because I don't like that trim affects the simulation. However, there are situations where the trim having weight looks more realistic, and if you like to see that, of course you can keep the weight, but I usually just put it on 0 so it doesn't interact with my simulation. Okay, and about the fabric, in this case I'm using just the regular clothes default for simulation fabric. You can use whichever fabric, and depending on the fabric you will use, the look of course will be a little bit different, and I will explain that a bit later. One thing I wanted to mention is about this fabric right here, trim full grain leather. Because its bending values are at 100, it tends to freak out quite a lot when adding a lot of internal lines. So maybe you need to adjust either these bending values to a little bit lower ones, or just pick a different type of fabric. But for this one I will just use the regular fabric, the default one. Okay, now next step will be to bring this part backwards, because usually I don't think it's stitched down like this part. I think this is behind the right side of the belt, so that's very easy. I just use select mesh box, select the mesh, and just bring it backwards with the gizmo and simulate. Oop. And sometimes you maybe need to help the simulation. Yeah, actually I didn't change the fabric from this one, so yeah, you can see what happens. So that's why this fabric is not the best to be used for the belt. So I will put it back to the default of simulation. Okay, looks much better, I think. Okay, and I think I definitely need more space for the loop, so I will move this by 5mm, and I will also move this by 5mm. So each side that creates the loop have extra 5mm for the loop. Okay, so far looks fine. And now I will add some internal lines. This one I will delete. So yeah, basically to create this loop, it's necessary to add a lot of internal lines that help this loop to be created. And first I will start with a few. So I usually do 2mm distance, and I do on both sides, something like this, and then simulate. And then you can see some loop is created. But one thing, this was the first internal line that we created, and because I folded it with fold arrangement tool, the fold angle automatically was changed to this value, but I want to keep it at 180 so that the loop is yeah, more round like this. So you can see the difference is pretty big. This is before, and this is after. Yeah, so this all of them should be at the beginning stage, all of them should be 180 degrees. Okay, and now we can see what to do next. So this will depend on your fabric, the fit of the belt, whether it's stretched out a little bit or it fits well, and yeah, what kind of garment you have underneath, and so on and so on, and what kind of trim you're having. So basically the goal here is that once you place trim like this, you don't have to like adjust it much. So I want this pattern piece to wrap around the trim on its own, and for that I need to use internal lines to control this wrapping around part. So first of all, I can see that maybe I need to move this sewing line a little bit to the back so that the loop comes more to the front rather than be symmetrical. So here I will delete this line, and then I want to check which internal line could it be. Maybe this one. I will attach it to this one like that. like this. Okay, and you can already see that the loop is already becoming a little bit wider and is coming closer to the shape that I want to achieve. Okay, so now I can see that I need more space here. So I will move this part for 3 millimeter. So this will create more space on this front side of the loop, like this. Maybe I need even more, so I will do additional 2 millimeter. Okay. Now I want to see what I can do with internal lines. So I think I need additional internal lines here. So I will just select this line, copy and paste, right click, shift and right click, and then I can create several internal lines with the same interval. So I will add 3 internal lines with interval 2 millimeter, but you can of course also use the offset as internal line. Okay, so the additional internal lines are created, and I need to create a more of a bump here. So I will try by adjusting the fold angle of this last internal line, and I need it to fold kind of inside, so I need to go over 180. So let's do 200. Yeah, something like this, but I think this one should be closer to the stitch line, like that. Okay, and then this one I can go below 180. So how about 160? You can see it creates more space already, so I can add 160 to the next one as well and see how it goes. Yeah, I definitely need more space here as well. So 160, 160. Still I can see it's kind of peeking through. So I think I will add maybe more 140 for all these 3 lines. And now the loop is created bigger, but again here now this part is peeking through. So I need to add some fold lines also here. So I will select these 4 and add 160, and let's see what happens then. Okay. So it does seem like I need more space, so I will add additional 2 millimeter. Okay, and I will move these a little bit by 2 millimeter. Yeah, looks right, I think. Yeah, now you can see everything is covered, so the trim is not peeking through in any way. So I think we can stick with this setup. Yeah. So basically whenever you do that, just add many internal lines, and then also seeing those internal lines can help you to understand, well, which internal line you need to adjust, which internal line is fine. So basically it's yeah, kind of trial and error. Just change the fold angle of the internal line and see what kind of shape it creates, whether that's the shape you want or not. Another fun thing is that I also need to add a hole, and that sometimes can mess up everything. So let's see if that's the case this time. So I will add it around here, but I need to know if I put it right in the middle. So I'm just creating this internal line in the middle. What I like with CLO is that you can see, I don't even have to create some extra points or anything. You can see on the screen that from top and bottom the distance is 18 millimeters, so that means the line that I will create is right in the middle. So these little measurements help to see. Okay, and now, well, basically you can also, even without this line, you can also create in the middle the hole, but I like to add the line just in case. Okay, which was the line? It was around here. So here I will put 7 millimeter in diameter. This will be the hole. So it could be that I have to move it a little bit. Okay, looks good. We'll delete this line and I will convert to whole. And as you can see, as I convert it to whole, the trim is peeking through a little bit. So yeah, once you add this thing, it might be that you still need to refine. But that's nothing too difficult. Let's say this line is 160, we can maybe add 140. How about this one? This is already 140. I'll add another line here. And could be that here 120, 120. Yeah, looks good. The trim is not peeking through, and to me it looks very stable. So no matter how you simulate it, yeah, the trim still doesn't peek through. Just because those internal lines are kind of controlling the loop. So that's kind of the advantage of using this method. And I can understand that this kind of looks complicated. At the beginning, when I started this method, I always got confused because I would add internal lines, I would change those fold angles, and I think, okay, this works very good, and then I would do the same thing on a different belt and it wouldn't work. But yeah, that's why it's good to understand that these values that you get in this case might not work in other case, so it's always like you have to refine it. But overall, I think in long term, it's worth the effort, because every simulation I will do, if I want to animate, I can be secure that the trim will not peek through this loop, mostly. It could be that it still happens, but I think as these internal lines are controlling this loop, it's it's less likely to happen. Anyway, let's finish up this belt. So I need to offset some part that will loop through to this side. So I will offset this pattern outline. I will add 6 centimeters. Okay, and now I need to adjust the sewing again for this inner piece where the trim is attached. So as you can see, the sewing now, it's attached to the end of the belt, but it needs to be attached here. So I delete this and I sew it to this internal line. Now I will create another internal line around here, because I want to fold it maybe a little bit closer. I want to fold it up like this, just for better oh no! Okay, I'm back. Fortunately, CLO crashed, but luckily I got an autosave, which sometimes doesn't work because my autosave is every 10 minutes, so very often when it crashes I lose a lot. I should probably change that setting. Anyway, so where were we? Okay, I need to adjust the sewing that I did already, and now I will create internal line here, and I want to fold it like this. Okay, now this will help the simulation better. Okay. Oh. Okay, and now I need to stitch this part down just to secure it. So I will add internal line somewhere here. And I will stitch it. Okay, so this already looks quite okay. You can adjust the position of this internal line a little bit if you want like a more kind of stretched look. But I think so far this is fine. This looks good. Okay, and now I can add the hole for this part, so somewhere around here, and I will just put it here, 7mm. Okay, so this is the hole. Maybe I need to move it a little bit. Okay, and convert a hole, and let's see what happens. Yep, still looks very stable, so the look is pretty good. And usually when you have this kind of belt, you probably have a belt loop on your pants or some separate loop attached to the belt if it's not going into the pants. So usually how I do it is, even though there's a loop that holds these two, like the end of the belt and the belt together, I do create sewing lines just to secure it better. But okay, so now I will add additional length for the belt. Let's say 30 centimeter. Delete this sewing line because I need sewing line here. And then I will offset as internal line and create 5mm line, and here as well. So these two lines will be stitched together like this. And this kind of helps to kind of keep all this part stable as well. And then once you do that, you can add the loop here and even keep the sewing. It will just help with the stability of the stimulation. Okay, and that's pretty much it at this point. And yeah, why I like this method, because it's super stable. No matter what you do, you don't have many issues with it. It's still very good. So once you set it like this, it stays very well. And one last step. So as you have this pattern piece that holds the trim, of course you don't want to see it. So I just copy it and change opacity to 0, and I add it to this extra piece, and it's gone. Yep. And here also the sewing is created, so in order to not see it in your render, you can select the sewing and you can delete the normal map, so it's not going to be visible. And there are definitely possibilities to refine it. You can add more internal lines, create this curve more realistic, more closer to the trim, and things like that. There are many ways how you can make it even more perfect, but I think this result is pretty good already. And now let's see what happens if I change the fabric. So I will change it for both. Let me move this up. So let's see, let's pick this one, for example. Yeah, even with this fabric, I think the result is still pretty good. Not so much refinement necessary. Maybe you need to move the hole a little bit, but overall the trim is not peeking through, even with this fabric. Okay, then the last thing after all, I will also show you how I usually add this kind of loop. So here I have 5mm width and 36mm height, so that's what I start. So 5mm, and then, well, I can already put extra millimeters, so it will be 38. I will put it on arrangement point and move it where it will be placed. So here, something like this. Maybe I even need more. I will add additional 1mm to each side. Okay, and then I will offset as pattern outline. Make sure to check create internal line because that's necessary. And then I will add 4mm, so that will be that fold here. And then I will add 2 cm in each side, like this. Okay, and then I use the fold arrangement tool. First, this one will be 90 degree. Oh. This one as well, more or less. It doesn't have to be like perfectly, but something like this. This one as well, fold and fold. Okay, then I will move it a little bit closer and then sew the ends together. Okay, and then I can do refinement. So put low particle distance, additional thickness collision, reduce it, and then see maybe it's too much. And then I can move maybe by 2 millimeters each side to reduce this width, see what happens. Maybe I need to reduce the overall height, so maybe 1 millimeter from each side. Like this. And usually it's very stable, and yeah, that's basically the process how I do these kind of loops. And yeah, I can, if I want to be very fancy, I offset as internal line to each side 1 millimeter. Oh, it's so close, so maybe 0.6. That's I think the lowest you can go. Or is it 0.5? 0.6 is the lowest number you can go when offsetting. Of course, that's a detail that, I mean, no one needs, but anyway, I like it. And then these offsets, I change fold angle to 90. This middle fold angle, I change to 180. Oh, no, it didn't work out how I imagined. Maybe I need to put this up. 160. Oh. Oh. Okay, these are the values. Well, anyway, I mean, that's like going too far. I think no one needs this kind of detail, but in case you are like me and you like this kind of detail and you like to spend a lot of time on this type of detail that no one really cares about, then of course there are ways how to do it. Anyway, so this is it for the video. I hope some of the tips are useful and it wasn't too confusing. Adding all these internal lines and deciding on the fold angles, I mean, it's really trial and error, but I do suggest you to try again and again different types, and then eventually you will be able to do it very quickly, and you will see the great benefits that this method brings to your workflow. Anyway, thank you for watching. Have a good day. Bye.